Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Objective. And today we're going to be talking about the Daily Objective. And today we're going to be talking about the latest in politics, everybody's favorite topic, but honestly, not the most important one. But anyway, enough with the finger wagging. Let's jump right into this. Please let us know what you think. Leave us a like, super chat, or else we are all going to starve. There was an election. It was election day yesterday, Tuesday. Obviously, if you're going to have a day when you want everybody to be available to go to the polls, do it right in the middle of the work week during business hours. Although these days, a lot of people are not going to work, which we'll probably get into a little bit later. And in Virginia, a guy that goes by the name of Youngkin, Glenn Youngkin, as the name was right there ready to go. Glenn Youngkin won in Virginia, a Republican. And also in New Jersey, I think the Democrat won, but it was close. It was close, which says, it's like Democrats, you might want to figure out if you're holding on to your voters, because Jersey and Virginia, I think both won in the presidential election last year or 2 years ago, whenever that was, 2020. 2020 was last year. But they're not doing so great now. Let's bring on my co-host, for Christ's sake, because I am dying over here. Please welcome a guy who he used to have a stack of books behind him. Today, he's got a beautiful, sort of lofty looking room behind him. I love that couch. This guy generally all around is just kind of he's the man of Chicago. Is he barefoot? I guess good time for a nap. Please welcome Jonathan Hoenig.
Great to be with you, Rozzy, and to welcome everyone to the Ayn Rand Center UK. Our viewers from around the world. It's such an opportunity to catch up, ironically, on American politics. America has always been the stalwart of individualism, of capitalism, and individual rights. That's certainly not the case anymore. So there's an interesting way in which America has become kind of a petri dish on a lot of issues. Time and time again, in my opinion, failing on holding up to its principles of Americanism, but we're going to talk about them today. And I thought, I kick us off on the super chat and welcome all of our viewers, again, from around the world, with a quote from Miss Rand's from a textbook of Americanism. She said that, and I'm quoting now, "Elections are won in every month of the year except November." Meaning, of course, this is my interpretation that, the real debate is not done at the ballot box. And I think you alluded to this in this idea of the importance of politics, but, it's one in the education that's done in everywhere from schools to around the dinner table, all the other months of the year, the 11 months of the year that ultimately make it manifest in November. So, we're here to talk about it. We'll talk about that Virginia race. There's a lot to say about it, but, we know that the real battle is not done at the ballot box. It's done in education. It's done in the schools. It's done in the so-called churches. It's done around dinner tables. That's what makes the politics stick.
Yes, and I think in recent decades, certainly you've started to hear people echoing that sentiment. I think Andrew Breitbart, rest in peace, said politics is downstream from culture. And you see similar things on the left. I mean, how much effort are the leftists putting into winning elections? A lot, I suppose, but how much effort do they put into policing language, into, breaking the balls of Hollywood producers, just demanding that people lose their jobs over the wrong pronoun or even saying something that's, offensive, but still not necessarily wouldn't have been grounds for losing your job in the past. How much effort do they put into changing the culture? A lot. So we'll never know entirely to what degree people got this from Ayn Rand, but certainly the memo is out there that politics is downstream from culture. Another thing we'll never quite know because we don't have a parallel universe to look at was the Reagan Revolution pro-capitalism to the degree it was? Like, was Reagan speaking the language of capitalism because of the influence of someone like Ayn Rand? In other words, when America sort of pushed back against the hippie left in the 80s, as arguably they did, would it have been less capitalistic but for Ayn Rand? That's a good question, because we might have seen this sort of populist surge back in, let's say, the late 70s and in the 80s, but for Ayn Rand. It's hard to know because we don't have a parallel universe to look at. But what we're seeing now, I think, with the Trump revolution, so to speak, was very much a populist, anti-ideological, in many ways anti-capitalist, sort of America as a family, sort of, very kind of nativist surge, pushback against the left. But then we see an election yesterday where the guy who won in Virginia is not exactly, from what I can tell, reading an article in Reuters is how it's pronounced, right? I mean, you're the political junkie, Jonathan. You're on TV.
Well, it's actually Reuters. They were known for financial data, but
there you go.
It's an interesting kind of jump you make, Rucka, from Reagan to this election in Virginia. Youngkin is the name. I was told, and as I'm an American, but I live in a different state. Neither of us live in Virginia, but it's ironic how every election seems to be the most important election in our lifetimes. You heard that over and over again. I mean, Dr. Peikoff told a story about Miss Rand on one of his podcasts. I can't remember which one, but basically what I recall was Dr. Peikoff saying that Miss Rand had them call Reagan's campaign office because Miss Rand had remembered Reagan being pro-choice as governor. And then when he decided to run for president, became pro-life. And if you remember, that was, as I understand it, the reason that Miss Rand did not vote for Reagan. And when I started looking into Youngkin, the first thing I looked at, and frankly, one a big issue for me is exactly that. And Youngkin, for his part, has described himself as unabashedly pro-life. He said he would support the restatement of some abortion restrictions and the bill that would ban the procedure after 20 years of pregnancy. The pro-life group has endorsed Youngkin. He said an abortion ban in Virginia is appropriate. So this idea, look, at first glance, that Youngkin, whoever he is this big unabashed win for, I don't like right and left, let's just say capitalism, individual rights. That alone to me says it's meet the new boss, same as the old boss.
I mean, you could be right that there's nothing new to see here, but I just know from reading the Reuters article that he was focused less on the sort of bring the jobs home and all that stuff. He was mostly focused on agreeable stuff like that the lockdowns are out of line, or that like the handling of schools is out of line, or that Democrats want to impose masks in school. That was either him or the New Jersey Republican who ran. But
no, you're right. Mm-hmm. This was in Virginia. It seemed like, you're right, it was all about the schools over and over again, and COVID meeting the schools and how all that came together in terms of parents' rights and control over the schools. That seems to be, so I'm glad they have us, two single guys with no children, talking about parents in their schools, but it's great. It's about, well,
no children. Rights, no children that we know of. Let's be objective, but still got it. But yeah, look, I mean, listen, I'm hardly celebrating here when a guy ran by saying public schools shouldn't do X, they should do Y. Obviously, unless we're pushing to privatize schools and abolish the Department of Education, we're all basically just fighting for the lobby system, and it's going to be more lobby system. I read in this article that Youngkin railed against CRT being taught in schools, and the school department, whatever they are in his state, they were like, we're not even teaching CRT in schools. But he's just like, oh no, you listen to me. We're gonna ban. So he wants to ban CRT in schools. Like I said, we need to privatize and get rid of public schools. The solution is not to argue over what should be taught there ultimately. So listen, I'm hardly celebrating here, but the sort of light at the end of the tunnel, I suppose, is that he doesn't seem to be as Trumpian as some candidates. So that's kind of a sign that maybe Republicans, look, when the election took place, people were wondering what's next for Republicans. What did they learn, if anything? And here we've got a guy, he's not big on the whole voter fraud rhetoric, and he's not big on a lot of the sort of nativism that you get from the Trumpians. And maybe there's not that big of an immigration debate happening in Virginia, for all I know. Maybe not that many immigrants are over there. But nonetheless, he's mostly focused on just the culture war stuff, like, get CRT out of schools, let the kids go back to school maybe without a mask, and and I don't know, I don't remember what else he was about.
Oh yeah, I mean, he seemed to present on a couple basic fundamental issues like school choice
Mm-hmm.
a rational alternative to the so-called left, which is unabashed collectivism. I mean, you are, as they say, too young to remember, but you remember Melissa Harris Perry? She was a
No.
host on MSNBC and years back, but
Hmm.
the whole idea being the children are our children. I mean, that is so commonplace among the so-called left. And I think amongst a lot of, let's just say, Republicans and the so-called right, there still is a sense of no, even though we have public schools, as you said. I mean, Rucka, you talk about, it's funny, you know, only one person could have said it better than you, Rucka, and that's me, of course. And, as I said, I tweeted, I hate to quote my own tweet, but the fundamental issue isn't critical race theory in schools. Exactly, you said it's government monopoly of schools. But when we talk about privatizing schools, people look at us like we're on mushrooms. They say, "What are you talking about privatizing schools?"
Mm-hmm.
Even I hate the fact that the right has, the so-called right, or let's just say the non-left, has given up that moral authority. They've given up the idea that of course government has to be involved in schools, and it's only objectivists who talk about not only the idea of privatizing schools, but the moral imperative of doing it. We're the only ones who are even talking about that at all. And Miss Rand, of course, talked about it years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and let's say 10 now, closer to 15 years ago, when there was that whole like Tea Party movement, you did see Republicans, even in elected office at times, but certainly outside of elected office, speaking the language of privatize. Rick Perry, my fellow Texan, I'm proud to say. Obviously, I shouldn't be obvious. I'm not that proud to live near him. I think he's got a lot of skeletons, a lot of skeletons in his closet. Maybe he himself is in there as well. These Texas people are very, very repressed. Anyway, I digress. He famously called Social Security a Ponzi scheme. I mean, this is how Republicans were talking in the primaries, trying to rile up the base, talking about privatize, talking about get rid of the EPA, get rid of this department, that department. Someone like Ron Paul, as much as I dislike and disapprove of so much Ron Paul, the fact that he was making so much noise, I mean, tells you something about where Republicans were compared to now. And again, going back to the Reagan era, which Rand, like you said, wouldn't vote for him because she saw so clearly the implications of his religiosity and of maybe his sort of semi-principled, unprincipled embrace of capitalism. Right. But compared to what we have now, I mean, you don't know what you got until it's gone. It's just like with various things that change in the culture. I mean, just look at punk rock. When 20 years ago, guys like me said any punk band on the radio is the enemy. And ironically, I only knew what punk was because of what was on the radio in the first place. But nonetheless, any band who sells out and is on the radio is the enemy. But if you would have told me one day there'll be something called Machine Gun Kelly and Olivia Rodrigo being called punk rock, I would have said, give me your AFI and thank you for that. Okay, back to you, Jonathan.
No, I'm delighted that I don't know any of that means or is, but this idea of you don't know what you have until you left. I mean, what are we left with? Is this a win of today's Republican Party, which, as you said, Rucka, okay, it's not CRT, but here you have the Florida governor DeSantis, who isn't seen as a radical, as I understand it. He is emblematic of what the Republican right wants to be, requiring a moment for school prayer. So, is this, as you said, I mean, 10, 12 years ago, the right was talking about privatizing education. And, Miss Rand has a lot of examples of it. We're going to talk about that. But, now we have the alternative to the woke left is a right which is requiring or looking to require school prayer. And I'm trying to think. There's a great Rand line about, I'm going to murder it, but it's something to the effect of like, alternative can be either better or worse. And in this case, I don't think it's much better. I think it's actually probably even worse. This idea of if the alternative to CRT in schools is prayer in schools, I don't know which one is worse.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the upsetting thing. And you can look at individual cases, like a guy like Charlie Kirk. He at one point was friendly with Yaron Brook. He used to watch him growing up, like speaking at his school. He was a politically engaged young man. He ended up starting his own, what's called Turning Point USA.
Oh, you're right.
Oh, come on. Turning Point USA.
Thank you.
And
I couldn't remember the name.
And at first spoke the language of free markets, as many Republicans did back then, many conservatives. And as time passed, as Trump became the sort of face of the right, the Republicans, the conservatives, so did Charlie Kirk adjust his tone to. And today, Charlie Kirk debates on behalf of Trump populism. That's in fact what he calls it. He wrote a book called like Trump Is It or something like that. Give me Trump or give me whatever it was called. You get the point. It had a picture of Trump on the cover of it. Trump populism is what he's about. And I think he's a microcosm. He's a very milquetoast young man. So he's hardly this radical, trailblazer. He's very much a milquetoast
certainly not
guy.
A radical for capitalism.
Right. Well, but the point being, he's not a radical for anything, but like even the fact that he's gone so far down the Trump rabbit hole shows you that that's sort of become the trend. And Charlie Kirk most recently is saying things like, yeah, let's double down in fighting the left. Don't just push back against CRT, push for prayer in public schools, or even worse, teaching the Bible. That's what he tweeted. Teach the Bible in public schools. So if that's the answer to the left, if the answer to CRT is teach the Bible in public schools, we are out of friends. We have no friends. We have no friends. And this is why a lot of us turned to punk rock in the first place.
Objectivism is punk rock. And, where, in my opinion, people should start is the Campachicos, which is Rand's article from the New Left, the Industrial Revolution. First of all, I want to just scold our active super chat. We probably are setting a record, Rucka. We have 0 super chats at this point. So I don't know if it's a reflection on our political analysis or your endorsements of Trump, which I know are always popular amongst super chatters. But read Miss Rand's article, The Campachicos, from the New Left. It is her, my opinion now, her definitive statement about the importance of education, the murderous, the Campachicos were a strange and hideous nomadic association. They were child buyers. They bought and sold them. They didn't steal them. And so they made kids monsters. And that's her metaphor for what, this is my analysis here, public education, government involvement in education has done to kids. It's turned them into monsters. And you see that on campuses every day. I read about it. I don't know what I would do if I had kids now. I certainly wouldn't send them to the best schools, because the best schools are turning out, and is it just CRT? It's everything. And if it's school prayer, it's even worse. Mm-hmm. So, it's the whole thing needs to be attacked at the core. So as you said, if the savior from the left is someone requiring school prayer, where are we?
I think I've heard objectivists, like maybe Yaron Brooks said this, like if he could pick like one topic or one issue to change, like wave a magic wand, maybe it would be to privatize education, which is to a lot of people counterintuitive. Like, what do you mean? Deregulate this and cut taxes and cut spending. But when you think about it, education is sort of the fountainhead of everything else. People they sit in classrooms for a good chunk of their life, and they listen to supposed experts just relaying information to them, relaying material that they don't realize is entrenched with philosophical
and
morality.
Morality. Isn't that it? And first of all, thank you to James. You don't have to contribute because he's correcting my pronunciation. Campachicos, my apologies. Read that. Rucka emphasizing the importance of that. I think there's the line from Evita, get them while they're young, Evita, get them while they're young even more. Kids are being taught that not just what CRT is, but that it is right, that it's right to look at people like a color. But, is it going to be even better when Republicans are requiring them to thank God every day for what they've brought? So read what God has brought them. Read yes, Scott, we should be education disruptors. Dr. Peikoff explains how. Listen to his course, The Philosophy of Education. It's free. It's on the Ayn Rand Institute's website. Read the objective standards case. This is now 8-9 years ago. C. Bradley Thompson wrote an article called The New Abolitionism, why why education emancipation is the moral imperative of our time. That's what we need to be fighting for. Not a little less CRT in the schools, but as Dr. Thompson talks about, education emancipation. Education emancipation, a free market, if you will, in education, getting government, this is my analysis here, getting government out of it completely. That's our only hope.
It is our only hope. I mean, it's one of the things we need to change. And by the way, like, let's say having a Bible class in public schools in of itself doesn't devastate the culture necessarily. It's that there's no good philosophy being taught in schools, and kind of more fundamentally, there's the private education does not have a standing chance to fight in this culture where the government is the main competitor. The government is providing the biggest source of education and taxing everybody. Believe me, if you think it's no big deal, you guys should buy some property, pay some property taxes, and see how cool it is to have to pay for public schools.
Well, a lot of people, I've heard people say that maybe ultimately this is a positive big picture because, and I think actually when I say people, I mean somebody in our chat who said basically this is net a positive because it's prompted people to take more interest in what is being taught to their children in schools, which I think probably maybe net is a positive, is because they think even in so-called good schools, and in America, people might not know, public schools are funded by property taxes. People realize that even in the so-called best schools, these terrible ideas, not just bad ideas like run-of-the-mill environmentalism, but really deadly, evil ideas like critical race theory are being taught in the most prestigious schools in the land. So what do you do?
Yeah, I know. It sounds
besides Van Damme Academy.
There you go. I mean, I know it sounds like on one hand we're saying privatize the schools and everything will be fine, but then we're like kind of complaining more and saying, no, we need a good philosophy, and then we go, well, no, not even that we need a good philosophy. It's that we need good methodology. That kids need to be taught to think and to pursue and to discover for themselves. And now we get into, I guess, Montessori type education and all of that, which might be much more widespread. Imagine if we had free competition, a free market in education, similar to what we basically more or less have in, let's say, the tech industry.
They always paint this thing of like, oh, what you want is uneducated kids running around on the street. And you think like, wow, those kids all have a supercomputer in their pocket. And what I want is Amazon to get an education, Apple to start opening so-called public schools. Like, I mean, even when you think about Ruck, I mean, what eBay or what YouTube offers is unbelievable access to the best educators in the world for free. So that disruption in education is going on. We just, in my opinion, need to make sure that objectivism is at the table, because our ideas about privatizing education are seen as wackadoodle now as what Lyndon LaRouche used to be, to kind of throw a term out there from ancient American politics. Like, we're seen as the wackos.
Yeah, we are seen as wackos. I can't imagine why you and I would ever be seen as wackos. But further, anyone who speaks about privatizing education, just like similar with privatizing medicine, people freak out. What do you mean? You're going to leave corporations? Yes.
Oh, right.
People who actually care about the product, they actually want to sell it for as cheaply and high quality as they can, are the people. And look at a cell phone from the 1980s and look at a smartphone today and tell me that the market doesn't produce better, cheaper, and more compact products. And now jumping back to education, if we had, let's say, a proven method like Montessori, something that produces not necessarily objectivists, but people who are interested and capable of thinking and pursuing the truth, pursuing knowledge, if we had that more widespread in the culture, then the culture has a chance.
Tazy is making this point, and she's our sole super chat. Tazy like Daisy. Keep that in mind. Your own, if you're watching, and I know you're a regular listener.
Oh, I know you're watching.
Teasy, it's Tazy like Daisy. Tazy, thank you for your generous contribution. Thank you even more for being part of our community and part of our discussion and a part of our posse, as they say. She says they're being taught, they meaning kids, they're being taught as facts when it's just a POV. And we need more POVs for kids to choose from and have access to. Isn't that so true, Rucka? I mean, you, like I did, had to fight to even find objectivism. We had to go out of our way even to discover it as younger people. So when we give them access to it, and that's part of what we're doing here with the Ayn Rand Center UK, is we had a lot of young people in the chat listen, and the podcast. We're letting them know that objectivism is not just a choice; it's the rational choice, and to make yourself available to it.
Yeah, and I think when we're doing our job here the best is when we describe the process by which we arrived at the conclusion that we're at. So we're not just saying, like, here as an objectivist, here's what I believe. It's more like, well, here's how I think of it. Here's how I like to think about it. And good teachers, whether it's preschool, daycare, all the way up to universities and beyond. Let's say an objectivist university like the one that ARI is conducting. I think the best teachers, they teach you how to think, like how to approach the pursuit of knowledge. And that's if that becomes widespread, and I believe the free market would make that type of approach to teaching widespread, then we have a chance. But as long as people are just being indoctrinated and just told either God created the world in 7 days or the white man is a puppeteer controlling us all, we're in bad shape, not only because the content is trash, but because the methodology is trash. Beyond that, just one quick thing I wanted to mention, because I just visited Detroit, just got back from Detroit. I'm driving around there and I see a sign out of every fast food place, a sign out of every window, car wash, everywhere you look, a sign saying now hiring, $500 signing bonus, $1,000 bonus. They're offering people cash just to come work. Is it like that in Chicago that you've seen, or have you not noticed anything like that? I'm getting choked up here just talking about this. People, this is not the America that I used to know. America was a place where people wanted jobs. But after the pandemic, after the lockdowns, after all the stimulus checks or whatever it is, after maybe people found new ways to make money under the table, I don't know what it is. But for one reason or another, we've got lines around the block at every Starbucks and McDonald's and every place where people are still very much looking to consume, but not enough people working at those places.
Yeah, I mean, look, the thing to keep in mind about jobs is, Rucka, in a free economy, there is an unlimited amount of jobs. It's not a fixed pie. The thing that makes me so sad about today's economy, if you will, is that $500 ain't what it used to be. And that, we'll save that for another show in terms of, what's happening. But just, my final 2 cents on this, the issue of the elections. We spent a lot of time talking about education because we know what it is about education is to encourage people. I would never encourage people to steal, certainly not from Miss Rand's estate. But I remember she and Dr. Peikoff tell a story, or Dr. Peikoff tells a story about should they buy a piece of music that was performed by, at that time, a Soviet recording, because the money goes back to the Soviets. Basically, take it, if you don't want to buy the book, go to Stephen Hicks's website where it is publicly available, okay, and read it. Read Miss Rand's The Comprachicos article. It's not very long. It's all here. If you Google it, it won't take you long. It's like everything Miss Rand writes, really easy to read. It's not at a really super level. And make yourself available to this very influential work that will change the way you think about education writ large.
Yeah, and I don't know if Mr. Hicks is authorized to offer that essay for free, but I will tell people, if you get the book Return of the Primitive, you can thank me later for
yes, exactly. It's completely worth whatever the $4 you're going to pay for it on those evil company called Amazon. It's a huge winner that people say, oh, I know Ayn Rand. Oh, you're a selfish SOB. End of a QED. Okay, there's so much people don't even know these gems like the Comprachicos. Take that opportunity to read it and then buy it later on.
It's never been more relevant than now, folks. I mean, now is the time. These last few years, we've seen philosophical premises coming home to roost, my friends. So check it out. So anyway, to recap the election, which I think is the point of the episode today, we've got a guy who won in Virginia, and I think a guy who almost won or came close to winning in New Jersey. Republicans who they're hardly something to write home about, but it is noteworthy that they're not exactly pandering to the Trumpian base, which may be an indication of what's coming around in the midterm elections and then the presidential elections later. It'd be great to see, I suppose, a Republican Congress taming the Democrat president and vice president, and then they're basically
nothing gets done.
Nothing gets done, and then we have a chance when the government is impotent. And listen, it's not like they're going to do anything when they're not in gridlock, right? Anything good, that is. Now, I guess we should call it a wrap there. There's a lot more we could get into, but I'm afraid we're out of time. By the way, I think the reason we've got a little bit of a lower viewership and no super chats, or almost no super chats, is because of the daylight savings time zone change in the UK. We're now on an hour later than usual, and I'm sad to say, actually in direct competition with the Ayn Rand Institute. So I'm guessing a lot of our friends are over there. So, by all means, we love having you view us, but if we had to lose to one entity, we're happy it was ARI. But starting next week, the time zone shift will take place in the US, which will mean we will never be in direct competition with ARI.
In an effort to get more viewers, I'm going to be talking in a Cockney accent for this point on. Rucka, to be trying to get them.
Wow. How'd you do that? By the way, one last thing. Have you been watching the new Curb Your Enthusiasm?
No.
Oh, are you not a fan?
It's not on my media diet at this point.
I am questioning your Jewishness now, but we can.
You should continue to question it.
We can investigate later when we're not streaming on YouTube, because we don't want your circumcision to get us banned. I'm very loose with the language today because obviously nobody's watching compared to usual. But in the most recent episode, Larry David's dentist is a Greek guy who blasts Greek music all the time. It's like, I knew you would like Greek music. I mean, it's just such a joy watching this Greek, larger-than-life character on Curb Your Enthusiasm and knowing we are part Greek. We are part of Nikos's family, and therefore we are Greek. Robert with $2 says, is it 230, 130, 330? I'm so confused, as am I. Get the government out of the time industry as well. Why should the government tell us what to do? I'm not actually sure the role of government when it comes to that, but I do know a lot about the government's role in education, medicine, and the economy at large, which is
I'll just say that isn't it? Because people always say, "Oh, well, you just want. What are we going to do with roads?" And you always think, we can't even get to schools. We can't even get to agriculture, right? And government in America plays such a central role in agriculture. So, when we get to the roads, it's something that, we're going to be, it's going to come very easy and quickly if we can start at the beginning. And that starts with education. And that starts with what we are doing at the Ayn Rand Center UK, what the Ayn Rand Center, the Ayn Rand Institute's doing. It's what Objectivism is doing. So thanks to all of our viewers for being part of it.
And like I've said before, people need to be selfish. If there's any hope, it's in people being selfish. If people actually want a good life, they're going to be susceptible to entertaining capitalism, egoism, selfishness as a virtue. But as long as we have an irrational society, as long as people are not educated on how to think, and as long as people would rather stay home than go back to work, my friends, we are in trouble. But enough of that. Let's, I guess, jump over to Clubhouse for a little while, and we'll be back here tomorrow. No other content here today, which I think should be an indication that it's unusual we don't have any more shows coming up, which means we often have a lot of shows coming up, which means you should support us. Please become a member. Link in the description and in the chat. Thank you, Jonathan. This has been a pleasure and a half. We'll be back here tomorrow, same time. And tomorrow, not only is the Daily Objective airing, but a certain somebody is finally going to be here to debate me. A certain somebody who apparently had a big TV show to work on and couldn't debate me when we were supposed to debate. And to quote Jesus himself in The Big Lebowski, "What is this day of rest shit? What is this bullshit?" All right. You remember when they couldn't bowl because John Goodman was Shomer Shabbos? Anyway, we'll get to it tomorrow. We're going to debate skepticism or religion. Which is worse? Which is the bigger threat? Oh, we'll go there. Oh, that's right. Everybody's favorite debate is going to be put to rest here tomorrow. So join us back here tomorrow. Thank you, Jonathan, for sitting through the world's longest outro. And goodbye.